For the first time, domestic workers will earn the national minimum wage. Sectoral determinations have traditionally meant domestic and farm worker wages have lagged well behind the national benchmark. The National Minimum Wage Commission has also adjusted the overall sum for 2022. Workers should earn no less than 23 Rand and 10 cents per hour. Gerhard Papenfus, who heads up the largest employers association in South Africa. We speak to him now for his response to this minimum wage increase, and he joins us now. Gerhard, it seems almost strange that the domestic workers and farm workers have been so behind in being eligible for a minimum wage.
Yeah, well, you can understand the historical reason for that. It is the rationale behind it was the ability to pay. Households aren't businesses, and the ability to pay the minimum wage was the reason for the differentiation between the general minimum wage and that of domestics, and the same applied to farm workers. That differentiation was last year was taken out. Farm workers last year, and now the domestics as well. So the question is, has that changed? There are two sides of this coin. The one is, of course, a worker, a domestic worker, deserves an increase, and the amount they pay, it's low. It is low, and so nobody can argue about the right that they have to get an increase. The other side of the coin is the ability to pay. At the end of the day, an employer can only pay what he can pay, and we won't know to what extent domestic employers will be able to meet this increased amount. And if they won't be able to do it, then that will lead to add to unemployment once again. You see, there are wealthier employers. They don't pay the minimum wage. They pay more generally. But there are those that simply just make it, and for them that might be a challenge. So we'll have to see. But I mean, that is not there yet. It's not introduced. It is still, that's the recommendation, and everybody has got until the 14th of January to make comments. But I think the fact that it is a recommendation is probably a good sign, or a sign that at least this wage will be implemented.
Gerhard, I speak as somebody, let me be very open, I speak as somebody who can afford a domestic worker, and I can afford to pay her way above the minimum wage. But surely if you can't afford a service, then you can't have one. Because I hear it all too often of people who have domestic workers who are paying them absolute pittance. And surely that's not fair either. I mean, if they can't afford the minimum wage, then you don't get to have a domestic worker. Well,
that is true, but again, the other side of the coin is what is better? Somebody that offers his or her service and says, "Listen, I have absolutely nothing else. Can I work for you for whatever amount? Half of this. Let's use that as an example. Half of the amount." And there's an agreement. I once mentioned an example. I said, and I used that as example. I said, I have a domestic, and that domestic at her house employs somebody for 600 Rand a month. And I asked the people, is that reasonable? Now, I must just add this. Before I used the scenario, I said to them, is paying a person 600 Rand a month reasonable? And everybody agrees, but it's absolutely not reasonable. And then I sketched the scenario of a domestic employing somebody at her home for 600 Rand a month. And everybody said, yeah, but that's different. And I said, well, that's the problem with this type of thing, is that there's different scenarios. So, you know, if you can't, if everybody that cannot afford it don't employ, you know, that will just increase the unemployment figure, and that will create other problems. So what we need in South Africa is we need more wealthy people, so that more wealthy people can employ more people. That is what we need, to grow the economy, create more wealthy people, so that they can employ at better wages.
Of course.
So I hear what you say, but you know what? Yeah.
Gerhard, sorry to just break in there. I don't have much time. What about implementation? Who actually makes sure that this minimum wage is set? Because I hear so many times domestic workers not even being paid because they get bored and, you know, they get lodging and meals. So who's actually going to oversee this process?
I don't think it's actually overseen. I don't think there's enforcement capabilities. But what happens when a worker gets dismissed? They normally go and lodge a claim for outstanding wages, and that's when these things come to the surface. But there's no inspections. I can't say there's no inspections, but it's just a very small amount. I think it's a small percentage where the Department of Labor just doesn't have the capabilities capacity to do it. So no, there's no. So you know what? That's what happened with minimum wages. People fly under the radar. They just don't pay. They can't do it. And you know, the question is, can't you do it, or don't you want to do it? No, we don't know. But they fly under the radar. So you know, if a person doesn't want to pay a wage, they normally just don't pay that wage, and they find alternative ways.
Yeah.